As Singapore journeys towards being a smart nation, increase in cyber risk is actually very unavoidable. Hence, good cyber security practices are very essential to help organizations digitalize safely. I'd like to introduce today's presenters. We have with us here today Ms. Veronica Tan from the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, CAS, and Mr. Baljeet Singh, Business Solution and Operation Manager from GICG. Okay, a little bit background about Veronica. She is driving the safe cyberspace initiative from the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore. Before her role in CAS, she was driving emerging technology strategy and programs such as blockchain and human-machine collaboration. She was also in a network engineering role in a leading ISP. She managed carrier switches, routers, cache, DPI, traffic management equipment, and network services such as DNS. She was also responsible for managing the ISP domain name registration service. Today, we are very privileged to have her with us to let you have a better understanding of Cyber Essential and Cyber Trust Mark. Okay, a little bit background about Baljeet. He has 7 years of experience in testing, inspection, and certification industry. He's a ISO 9000 quality lead auditor, ISO 37K anti-bribery lead auditor, ISO 27K information security internal auditor, ISO 22000K business continuity internal auditors, second party supplier quality auditors, and he is also a certified Scrum Master. Today, Baljeet will be sharing with everyone here on the benefits and requirements of the mark, and also a bit about how the certification process works. And he will be touching on the application fee and also the grants available for this to Trustmark. And also, lastly, he'll be sharing early bird savings exclusively for the participant today. Lastly, we'll be running a live Q&A at the end of the webinar, as we have enabled our Ask a Question feature. It's on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you have any question, please feel free to pop in at your chat over there or raise your hand to allow us to let you speak. For those of you just joining us, welcome once again. I'll pass time over to Veronica. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. Let me just put up my slides so that I can take everyone through. Okay, so I'm very happy to be here today to share more about the Cyber Essentials and Cyber Trust Mark. But before I jump and dive into certification, I thought I should take one step back to have a look at how enterprises typically go about when they start off in their cybersecurity journey. So starting with the left, I think for most enterprises, it really starts with the awareness phase. And if any of you are basically bosses in the room, you would then realize that actually cybersecurity is no longer just a technical issue. In the past, I think people would think about it as a technical issue and outsource it to somebody else, which they feel are domain experts. But increasingly, I think the field is starting to see a shift that once a company starts to go digital, and many of the businesses are going digital today as accelerated very much by COVID pandemic, then cybersecurity becomes part of the overall business risk management. And among the various risks that you want to think about, if you're very digital in your presence, then obviously you also want to make sure that you go about doing it in a cyber safe manner. So I think CSA has published cybersecurity toolkits to help the bosses understand it from a business perspective. And assuming that this is now an area that has caught a boss's attention, the next step is actually to take action. No point knowing about something, but actually not actually taking action and doing anything about it. So I think for the small businesses, we are also quite mindful and cognizant that smaller businesses may not have very much resources to devote to cybersecurity, whether it's budget or whether it's manpower. And we try to make it easy for the small businesses. So we have a toolkit for the employees so that as a business, if you're not going into cybersecurity awareness training for your employees in a big way, download our toolkit. It is a good way to get you started in the journey. It is also one of the requirements in order to qualify for Cyber Essentials certification. There will be other toolkits I'll talk about later on, but let me just move on to the right-hand side of the chart, where we assume that the businesses have moved through that journey of awareness, taking action, and have implemented cybersecurity. And this is where cybersecurity can now become a business advantage for you, and you can actually position it as your competitive edge. So CSA has just launched the Cyber Essentials and the Cyber Trust certification for enterprises. And basically it looks into the people, process, and technology aspects of your organization. In terms of benefits, I think in the past, without a certification program, when you put in place cybersecurity, you would see it very much as a business cost. And sometimes you may ask yourself, how do you actually generate the ROI from this investment? Actually, the answer lies in, firstly, loss prevention, also in preserving your reputation. And increasingly now, as the number of attacks happen, I think people are a lot more aware of cybersecurity becoming important in their business. So having a certification forms a visible indicator of the cybersecurity practices that you implement in your organization. This helps you to build trust, and you can tell your customers that actually with the certification, you have an independent assessor going through your practices to make sure that you're cyber safe. And this in turn then becomes a competitive edge for you. Now, earlier on, I briefly mentioned about the rise in cybersecurity incidents in the industry the past 2 years as a result of rapid digitalization. One specific one that I could cover more about is supply chain attacks, where they too have risen over the past 2 years. What is a supply chain attack? It is essentially an attack on an organization, not directly, but indirectly through a vulnerability or exploit in your supply chain partner, for example, your provider or your supplier of a service. So I think in this case, it is serious enough that ENISA, which is a cybersecurity agency in Europe, looked at some of the major supply chain incidents the past 2 years and published a report on it. The statistics here were taken off the ENISA report, where they say that 62% of the attacks actually exploit the trust of the customer in their supplier. And increasingly, as this becomes a bit more common and pervasive, customers would actually start wondering and thinking and asking about their suppliers to ask if you're cyber safe. Am I going to be exploited or attacked as a result of a vulnerability in my partner? So I think basically trust and cybersecurity does influence purchasing decisions. So the statistics shown here were taken off an AXA survey, where they show that actually in their survey, the consumer surveyed would likely avoid doing business with an organization that has experienced a cyber attack in the past year. And when they consider buying a product or service, they do consider the trustworthiness of that business. So I think jumping into the Cyber Essentials mark, the Cyber Essentials mark is a mark of cyber hygiene, and basically it doesn't prescribe that you need to do everything. The reason why we don't do it is because we want to target it for the smaller businesses that are just starting out in putting in place all the right cybersecurity measures. So to put in 100% security, practically speaking, it is a big investment, it's costly, and a bit of a high bar for the small enterprise. So what we have done instead is to identify the measures that will help you to stay protected from the majority of the common cyber attacks, but not everything, but it is the majority of the common cyber attacks. And we help you to prioritize what are the areas to focus on first. So I think if you look at the cyber industry, there's actually a lot of things out there, products, services, everything. And I think a natural question is, where do I even start first? So through the Cyber Essentials certification, we have identified the 5 major categories here that you would want to start off with first. Starting off with assets. Assets will include your hardware, your software, your data, and more importantly, your people. Earlier on, I mentioned cybersecurity awareness training is one of the requirements. So this is to make sure that your people are cyber safe. After you put in all your protective measures, it's not an exploit doesn't happen as a result of a people or human error. Second category would be in the area of secure and protect, where we'll look at things like malware protection, as well as secure configuration. And then in the area of update is to make sure that we constantly update our software so that as new vulnerabilities occur, basically the updates will help you to close the holes in these software that you have. Backup is another important area. Earlier on, I mentioned that supply chain attacks were increasing in the industry. The other one that's seeing a major increase is also in the area of ransomware, where you are being held ransom by cyber attackers who lock up your data and don't allow you to have access to it. So if you have a data backup that you can restore your data from, this helps you to basically go back into business, normal business operations. Finally, the area of response. Basically, the first 4 categories of measures are largely preventive, but it doesn't mean that you do not get attacked. And if you do get attacked, good incident response will be able to help you to basically respond and recover quickly, and you can then restore your business operations very quickly. So collectively, the 5 major categories of measures here would help you to stay protected from the majority of the common cyber attacks. The certification duration is for 2 years, and in order to get certified, you would need a certification body such as GICG here, and there will be an independent assessment in the form of a desktop assessment. Now, earlier I mentioned that we are cognizant for the smaller enterprise. Usually, they may not be so ready or prepared to go for certification because they think that a lot of preparatory work is done. It needs to be done. So what we have done is to try to to make it easier and to lower the barriers. Firstly, in the form of toolkits that your IT personnel or colleagues can look at in the small enterprise. Typically in the small enterprise, even if you have implemented the measures, sometimes you may not have the time, energy, and resource to actually properly document it down and take stock of your assets and so far. So basically, this toolkit has the templates to help you to document your process, your plans, and so on, so that you have it on hand, and this would be needed for certification. Some of you may also be, as you listen to this, grumble and say, oh, but I got no time, I got no resource, I got no people. And that's where the right-hand side comes in. We have worked with an initial ecosystem of products and solutions providers who can actually help you to get started in the journey. Some of them are product providers, some of them are solutions, and some of them are as a service provider. So what I wanted to highlight is basically a special category called Cyber Essentials as a Service. These are as a service providers who are familiar with the 5 major categories in Cyber Essentials. They also know about the templates and the plans that we have put out. So they would be able to help you to take these templates and apply them in the context of your organization. So the choice is yours, whether you want to do it in-house by yourself or whether you want to go to a provider. And in case you need a provider, well, the Cyber Essentials as a service provider would be a good starting point for you. So I briefly talked about the Cyber Essentials mark. Let me just jump into the Cyber Trust mark. The Cyber Essentials mark is essentially for companies that are looking at cyber hygiene measures, and the Cyber Trust mark is for companies that have gone beyond cyber hygiene. Now, for companies that go beyond cyber hygiene, it's actually quite a huge list with varied needs and various different stages as well. So I think it's not very practical for us to prescribe one single set of things. What we have done is to take on a risk-based approach, and that's basically a tiered approach with 5 different tiers as shown in the slide here. And each tier is associated with a certain number of cybersecurity preparedness domains. And the fact that this is risk-based, what you would need to do is basically to go through the risk assessment process. Every organization is unique. So going through the risk assessment process, which is guided, you will help to think about the application of this risk in the context of your business and your organization. And from there, you'll be led to deciding what will be some of the measures that you may want to put in place in order to mitigate the risk. And you also have to make a decision as to whether you want to further mitigate because the risk is too big, even after you put in place all these measures, in which case you have to put in some more. Or in some cases, it's a matter of deciding that, yes, your risk tolerance allows you to basically accept this specific risk. So this is essentially a risk-based approach that the trust mark process would put you through. The certification duration is for 3 years. And yes, an independent assessor is also involved. In this case, they will look at your documentation. They will also look at your implementation and your effectiveness. So I think I've covered quite a bit on the Cyber Trust as well as the Cyber Essentials. So the documents are all available on CSA website, and accompanying the document is also a self-assessment template. We have a different one for Cyber Trust as well as for Cyber Essentials. The one I'm showing here in the slide is the one for Cyber Essentials, and you can basically download a copy, walk through the questionnaire, and think about whether this is being practiced in your organization or not. It will then generate a report that looks something like this, tells you the areas where you have met the requirements, and some of the areas where you may need further work for further mitigation is then highlighted as well. So even if, as an organization, you feel that you're not ready to go for certification, we do strongly encourage you to take a copy of the self-assessment and download it anyway, because it'll help you to basically reflect through the various practices in your organization, see whether you're ready, and basically for the areas where you're not so ready, invest in the efforts to make them ready, and this will then get you started in your certification journey. Oops. So steps towards certification. I think first is to go through the self-assessment that I covered in the previous slide. Step 2 is to prepare the supporting documents that you will need for certification. And please refer to the toolkit that I mentioned earlier, because it does have some templates to get you started. And thirdly, when you're ready, please do appoint your certification body, who will send an independent assessor to come down and basically walk through your implementation. So with that quick one, I've come to the end of my presentation. Happy to hand this over next so that you can basically understand a little bit more about the ins and outs of the certification process. Over to you.
Many thanks, Veronica. So let me quickly share my screen. Okay. So yeah, thank you everyone for taking out your precious time to come for this webinar. So maybe I'll just start off with a quick corporate overview of GICG. So basically, we were founded in the UK in the early 1990s. We will be celebrating our 30th year anniversary next year. And the unique thing about GIC is that we are one of the leading certification body that is headquartered in Singapore and locally owned. What this means is all our branch officers, any audits, auditor qualifications and certifications approved are checked in Singapore and are approved by Singapore before the certificate gets issued. So this is just a quick history of our journey throughout the years from 1993 all the way until 2019, where we actually moved into the testing, inspection and certification space as well. I'll touch about what services we provide in my next few slides. This is our global footprint. So as mentioned, Singapore, it is the HQ. So what this means is any certificate that's issued through all these 30 countries goes through Singapore. And this is our profession. This is what we do. We are in the independent third-party assessment field. And what we usually do is we take a reference standard, we perform an action, and there will be a deliverable at the end of the day. So let's take, for example, the CSA trust mark. We use the reference guidelines. We will perform an audit. And if you meet all the requirements, we will award you with the CSA Cyber Trust Mark certification. A bit more about GIC services. As mentioned, we are a TIC company. So just quickly touching on our testing services. We provide testing services from environmental, chemical testing, toys and juvenile product testing, softline testing, hardline, mass testing as well, and also packaging testings. And we are also an inspection body. So what we do is we check initial production all the way until container loading. So during initial production, we will check the quality of the production process. So this may include machine setup, raw materials, and so on, all the way until the product is ready to be shipped and loaded onto the container. We will check whether does it meet the customer's requirements or even local regulation and legislation requirements. And more about our certification services. So we provide a wide range of international standards from quality to environment to facilities management, and also, of course, ISO 27000, which is information security, which I'll be touching on a later part of my presentation. And we are also aware of Singapore standards, food standards, and also we do product certification for ready-mix concrete. So let's dive into the Cyber Essentials mark. So I think Veronica has already shared quickly what this is about. I'll just quickly run through this again. So as Veronica pointed out, that this Essentials mark is tailored towards small and medium enterprises. So if you do not know where to start, this is a very good tool, a very good guide for you to start implementing cyber hygiene measures against common cyber attacks. So basically what this does is this certification, it provides a recognition that you have some good cyber hygiene practices in place to protect your customers against the cyber attacks. So I think Veronica has already shared about this. I'll just quickly touch on this as well. So there are 5 categories, as you can see: assets, secure and protect, update, backup, and response. So there are some elements in all of these 5 categories. So in assets, that's people, where you equip your employees as the first line of defense. There's hardware and software. Basically, you need to know what hardware and software your organization has and how you should protect them. And of course, data, you need to know where your data is stored and how you secure it, especially your business critical data. For secure and protect, virus and malware protection, so you can get softwares to protect this. Access control, so who has the control to your data and your services. Secure configuration, making sure that you guys use secure settings for all your organization hardware and software. And update, which Veronica also touched on, is to make sure that you are constantly patching and having the latest updates, so you are protected from the latest cyber attacks. And of course, backup is very essential to have a all your essential and critical data being backed up and stored offline. And the last part will be response, to have an incident response, to be ready to respond and recover from cyber incidents. So part of this cyber essential marks also, there is a boundary and a scoping statement when we will award you the certification. So what this means is that the scope of the assessment and certification can cover your organization's entire IT infrastructure, a subset, a specific business unit, a process, or a location. So you need to know what are the business units involved, what's the network boundary, the devices and systems within the scope, the software and services within the scope, and of course, the physical locations. And do note that the requirements of the essential mark, they will apply to all devices, system, and software. So what this means is any issued laptops, even bring your own devices if you're doing company's work or having company's data, this will be covered in the scope of certification. For systems and software, if let's say you are having a CRM system, this, and it's part of the scope, this will be covered as part of our assessment. So for example, just sharing with you a quick scoping statement. If let's say you wish to attain certification just for your sales and marketing department, you can term the scope as sales and marketing supporting the provision of cloud-based enterprise resource planning software, if let's say you are a ERP software company. So this just to give you an idea on how the scoping is done and the boundaries of the audit. And as Veronica already shared, basically you have to download the self-assessment questionnaire, which is readily available on CSA's website. I put the link down there. And basically the purpose is to assess your organization's cybersecurity implementation against requirements and recommendations. As you can see, I clearly underline both of those. So quickly touching on those, requirements are denoted as shall. What this means is that you must comply to this in order to qualify for the Cyber Essential certification. And recommendations are denoted with the word should. What should means is they are recommendations. However, they are not compulsory to comply for the Cyber Essential certifications. However, we do recommend you to implement these recommendations. And in the questionnaire, if you guys are not going to implement these recommendations, there's a column for you to justify why this might not be applicable to you guys. So just quickly sharing example of a requirement and what we as independent assessors will be looking at for you to get a rough idea on how the assessment process will be like. So for example, a requirement under A.8 for backup, it states here that the organization shall identify business critical systems and those containing essential business information and perform backup. What needs to be backup is guided by identifying what is the needed to for the business recovery in the event of a cybersecurity incident. Examples of business critical systems include stock trading system, railway operating and control systems. Example of essential business information include financial data or business transactions. So to meet this requirement, what GICG's assessors will be looking at will be two parts. Will be the what means do you take in performing backups, and also the comprehensiveness of the systems in the backup plan. So the backups can be done manually, or let's say you put it in the hard drive and you store it offline. Another example will be you purchase a software or a system to do this backup for you. So in terms of comprehensiveness, we will be looking out for those business critical data. So we will see whether you have identified that and it is within the scope of certification, and how you guys are doing that backup. And for example, if you guys are using cloud service, we know many organizations now have moved towards the cloud, let's say AWS or Google Cloud. It will include storing these backups either in a hard disk drive, or you can purchase some of the additional features that your provider is providing to provide the backup. So what do you need to do? What do you need to have ready before you call for assessment? Basically, what we will need is your organization chart depicting the business unit, so that we know how your organization is being set up and what's within the scope. Of course, the context of your business and basically to understand the boundary, whether you are limiting it to just a department, a subunit, or the entire organizations. We will also need a systems and network diagram, an inventory list of all your devices and systems, and also your software and services, and of course, the locations where you guys operate and carry out your services, and of course, the completed Cyber Essentials mark self-assessment. So how the independent assessment will happen is, for the Cyber Essentials mark, our assessor will be performing an off-site inspection of the documents and other artifacts, as what I shared earlier as one of the requirement and our acceptance criteria, what we'll be looking out for. So the auditor will connect with you offline and will be reviewing all these documents and to check for compliance. And for your organizations to be certified, it should meet all requirements. So as I pointed out, there are recommendations and requirements. Recommendations are not compulsory but highly encouraged. However, requirements, you must fulfill them all to achieve certification. And as Veronica already shared, that this certification shall be valid for 2 years after award. And after the second year mark, you may choose to recertify or even progress to the Cyber Trust mark or even ISO 27001. So this is where we come with the interesting part, which are the certification fees and also the early bird incentives. So CSA has provided a support for you guys and are working with us to actually provide some support for you. So if you do fall within the SME category in less than 10 employees, the original certification fees are $400. After the support from CSA of $100, we will be charging you $300. For a medium SME, it will be $600 initial fees, and CSA support of $200, you'll be paying $400. And if you're a larger SME, it'll be at $800, and with $250 support from CSA, you'll be paying only $550. Of course, there are some terms and conditions that come with this. So it is only applicable from 29 March 2022 all the way until next year, 31st March 2023. And of course, this is only for the first successful certification per enterprise, and this you must be a first-time applicant. And of course, you must be a Singapore registered business or a non-profit organization incorporated in Singapore. To qualify for this, do reach out to us. We will provide you with an application form and you must complete it, and we will log you in for this final certification fees after the support from CSA. So I've touched on the Essentials mark. What I'll be moving on to is the Cyber Trust mark. So as Veronica already explained, that this trust mark is catered towards adopting a risk-based approach, and for you to understand your risk profile and how to mitigate these risks. So basically, it provides a guided approach to your organization to assess the cybersecurity risk and preparedness. This clearly provides a clear pathway towards international cybersecurity and information security standards like ISO 27001, which I'll be touching on at the end of my presentation. And getting this Cyber Trust certification is a mark of distinction, and your organization will be recognized as a trusted partner with robust cybersecurity. So as Veronica also pointed out, that there are 5 preparedness tiers, and in those tiers, they are between 10 to 22 domains. So the first level starts at the supporter level, which has 10 domains, practitioner, which has 13 domains, promoter, which has 16 domains, performer, which has 19 domains, and advocate, which has 22 domains. So enterprises can use this Cyber Trust Risk Assessment Framework to identify which preparedness tier is more suitable for you guys. Of course, this is a indicative target, and basically, as CSA has come up with a profile of the organization. So generally, organizations with leading digital maturity and larger organizations will be geared towards the advocate tier. However, this may depend if you guys operate from different sector to sector, depending on the risk that you are exposed to. For example, if you are providing services to the financial institutions, you might be liable for MAS TRM, which is the Technology Risk Assessment by Monetary Authority of Singapore, and you might be a very lean setup, a small enterprise, but you might have a leading digital maturity, depending on which industry you're serving. So this just forms as a guide, but after you have done your risk assessment and your preparedness questionnaire, you will get an idea on which tier you fall into. So what are the requirements? I will touch on them very briefly in my next few slides, but just to give you an overall broad picture, basically there are again 5 categories over here, as you can see: cyber governance and oversight, cyber education, information asset protection, secure access and environment, cybersecurity resilience. And out of these 5 categories, there are a total of 22 domains. So if you're going for the supporter, you need to comply with the 10 domains, which is pointed out which domain you need to comply: practitioner, promoter, performer, and advocate. So quickly touching on the domains. First category is the cyber governance and oversight. So I'll quickly just give a quick description on what's required. So for governance, basically a development of a cybersecurity framework with defined roles and responsibility, and this must be communicated to all stakeholders. There of course must be policies and procedures as well. Basically you guys will need to develop cybersecurity policies and procedures that are approved and also communicated within the organization, and at the same time they are periodically reviewed and monitored for compliance. Next domain will be risk management. Cybersecurity risk management is performed, risk treatment plans are enforced, and residual risks are regularly monitored. So I'll touch a little bit more on this, as it is part of the self-assessment questionnaire that CSA has provided. I'll touch on this in my next few slides. I'll move on first. For cyber strategy, basically there's a work plan established, implemented, monitored, and reviews with the inclusion of timelines and also the resources that are committed to these strategies. Compliance, basically applicable regulations and legislations. I quickly touched on the, if you're providing services to financial institutions or banks, you will most likely be subjected to MAS, TRM. If you're in the healthcare sector, they do have their own requirements as well. So depending on the industry, need to comply to the regulations and legislations. The last part will be here, audit. A cybersecurity audit is established and implemented with monitoring and of course the review of the findings for continual improvement. Next category will be the cyber education. So there's one domain in this, which is the training and awareness. So cybersecurity awareness and training is given for employees. There's also an assessment for these trainings, and cybersecurity skill set. Sorry, I missed out the skill set. Cybersecurity skill set is honed and developed. For the next category, which is the information asset protection, first domain will be asset management. So your hardware and software information asset inventory list is maintained, and the asset handling must be consummated with to confidentiality and sensitivity levels. Basically, only certain approved employees must be handling certain assets, and certain employees are not allowed to handle certain assets. Data protection and privacy, you must establish and implement policy and procedure and data handling processes, taking into account the risk classification and also handling of business critical data. And of course, backup, we touched on this in the essentials as well. A detailed backup and recovery procedure must be established and implemented with a specified frequency. And I think the next domain is very, very popular given the COVID pandemic situation, the BYOD, or bring your own device. So there must be policies, procedures, and guidelines for BYOD. And this must be implemented with security controls that enforce security protection for those devices and the data that you will be accessing to on your own device. And the next point will be the personal and work-related data segregation. So there must be a segregation of you accessing your personal and your work data on your BYOD. Next domain will be system security, which is the monitoring of updates and patches installed, which we also touched on in the essentials mark. And of course, there must be a configuration management tool implemented. Antivirus and malware, implementation of antivirus and malware solution, and also web filtering, and a subscription to threat intelligence as well. The last domain will be SDLC, Secure Software Development Lifecycle. So you must implement a SDLC framework and of course a change management process as well. The third category will be secure access and environment. So this relates to physical security as well. So the first domain will be access control. So there must be a role matrix access review, and we will look at password complexity as well. And for critical systems, let's say financial systems or accounting systems, a 2FA, and for certain access or certain data, there must be privileged access. For next domain will be the cyber threat management. There must be implemented what we call the security information and event management with log monitoring policies, processes, and procedures. And of course, there must be a procedure to respond to these abnormalities detected. For the next domain will be the third party and oversight. If you are dealing with subcontractors or any third party organization who has access to your data or performing work on your behalf to your customers, there must be service level agreements, and they must adhere to the security policies and the obligations set up by your organization. The next domain will be vulnerability assessment. You must establish what we call a vulnerability assessment and pen test, VATP for short, and to be performed regularly, and a minimum requirement is once a year. Next part, which I touched on earlier, was the physical and environment. So there must be measures in place to protect physical assets, and there must be regular review of these physical controls if they are working. And of course, there must be 24/7 monitoring of site or sites, depending on the nature of your business. Last domain will be network security. Network access control and network segregation must be configured and implemented. And of course, we are looking for a firewall capable of monitoring and detecting states of all traffic on a network to track and defend based on the traffic patterns and flow. So what we call this is a stateful firewall. There are stateless and stateful firewall. So we're looking out for the stateful firewall. And of course, there must also be a review of the network architecture. Next domain the next category and the last category is cybersecurity resilience. The first domain will be incident response, security incident response plan with policies and procedures in conducting investigations. And there must be a tabletop exercise, either a hybrid exercise or live cybersecurity incident exercise where you guys do a mock-up or do a live event where a real life cybersecurity attack happens, and how will your business continuity plan comes into place and how your cybersecurity response plans kicks in. The last domain will be business continuity and disaster recovery plan. So we are looking out for the critical processes that you guys identify and the redundancies of critical assets by doing a business impact analysis, and also the recovery time objective set. And it's supposed to be recovery point, typo error there, recovery point objective also defined. And there must be at least an annual review of your business continuity and your disaster recovery plan. So I briefly went through all the domains of the cyber trust mark, and similarly to the essentials mark, of course, there is a scoping statement as well. So this is similarly what I explained to earlier on during the essentials mark. So I won't touch on this again. And for the self-assessment, again, it's available on CSA's website. And the thing about the cyber trust assessment is it comes with 3 parts. There is a risk assessment, which I shared, I'll touch on in my next few slides, where you do your assessment of risk and the assessment of your cybersecurity preparedness. There's also a preparedness questionnaire and also the cyber essentials questionnaire. So a bit more about the risk assessment, basically looking at this diagram very, very quickly, you guys must, once you guys have downloaded that self-assessment questionnaire, basically you guys will need to do a risk assessment of your inherent risk. So what this means is some of the common cybersecurity incidences. So CSA has done a fantastic job in categorizing some of these security incidences for you. So they are already on the Excel sheet already pre-populated for you, and you just need to answer those questionnaires. So these common incidents are categorized into 6 categories: data breach, human factor, infrastructure, physical security, regulatory and compliance, and supply chain. With this, you must assess your inherent risk through likelihood and impact. So likelihood, what this means is the indicative probability of occurrence in a year. So whether is it rare, unlikely, possible, likely, or highly likely. And the next part will be actually the impact. So whether would it be a minor impact, a moderate impact, a significant impact, serious impact, or major impact. So this is in terms of harm towards strategic, financial, operational, compliance, brand value, or reputation. So once you have done that and implemented, answered all your cybersecurity preparedness, it will give you the residual risk assessment. Once you have come out with your residual risk assessment, you will need to enforce your risk treatment plan. And before you get ready for certification, there is an option that you want to do a pre-certification audit. This can be done through external consultants. If you guys are interested to find out more about this, we can definitely talk more. And giving an example of a requirement. So for example, the data protection and privacy requirement, if you want to achieve the advocate level, it states that the organization has established and implemented policy and procedure to report on data protection and privacy risks and initiatives to the board or senior management to ensure that they are kept informed. So us as assessors, what we'll be looking out for is these three main elements: is the comprehensiveness of the policy and procedures, the sign-offs by senior management, and the reporting done, the evidence of the reporting done to the senior management or the board. So the comprehensiveness, we'll be looking at all the requirements on regular reporting on data protection and privacy risk initiatives to the board. And we'll be looking whether senior management has visibility of this, or whether they have signed off of policy or procedures, or it's being communicated to them and they are aware of this. And documentary evidence we'll be looking at, it could be a minutes of meeting, it could be a dashboard, it could be a technical memo, email to inform the senior management on the status, and what's the reporting format and the frequency, and of course, what is the content in their message. So similarly, as the essentials mark, what you guys need to do to get ready is, of course, we'll be looking at your org chart as well, your context of business. We will need your system, network and diagram, inventory list, software and services list, locations, and of course, the self-assessment questionnaire. And the certification process for this is a little bit different as the essentials mark. This is a 3-year certifications process. So in year 1, we will come and do the audit. How the audit is done, I'll touch on my next slide. But once you have received your certification, you'll go to year 2, which will be due for your annual surveillance audit number 1, which will be checking compliance, that your policies, your procedures, and all the implementation that you have put in place in your first year, is it being regularly maintained, and is it improving over time? So that's what we'll be looking at. Year 3 as well, your annual surveillance audit number 2, and you can go for a recertification, or if not, you want to go to the next level, we can go to the ISO 27001 certification. So more about the assessment. This is a little different from the essentials assessment. It's broken down into 2 parts. What will happen is there's a stage 1. Stage 1, what we will do is a offsite inspection, similarly to what we do for the essentials mark, where we will actually evaluate the relevant documentation and the design of your measures, and basically get the assurance that you guys have the framework ready, you guys have the implementation ready for us to proceed to the stage 2 audit, where we'll be checking for on-site implementation. So what you have, what risk treatment plans and actions you have put into place, what measures we have put into place, we will be verifying the implementation on-site, and to review the documentation, we might interview personnel on their knowledge and cybersecurity awareness, do a site tour of your physical and environment security. And as mentioned before, this certification is valid for 3 years, and to maintain this, you'll be due for your annual surveillance audit number 1 and 2 in year 2 and 3. So about the certification fees, the certification fees for this Cyber Trust certification, it starts from 800 to 1,002, depending on the size of your organization, the scope of your certification, and the presence of multi-sites and any other related variables. So it's a bit different from the Essentials mark. Basically, if you would like to have a definitive cost proposal, do reach out to us at the end of this webinar, and we can set up a discussion so we can understand your business operations better and to give you a definitive proposal. And for grants available, the Enterprise Singapore grant, the EDG grant, is applicable if you guys want to go for this Cyber Trust certification. So I put a link there. You guys can also look at Enterprise Singapore's website and look under market access and standard adoption, and more details on how you can apply for the grant is available there. So quickly touching on the next point, which is one step up to ISO 27001 certification. I will not take too much time, but basically after the Cyber Trust certification, if you guys want to go to the next level, you may implement ISO 27001 certification. This is an international standard for information security, and basically it sets out the specification for a ISMS, Information Security Management System. So it's a holistic approach where it secures confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all your corporate information assets. So just like the trust mark forms the pathway of policies, procedures. So this is what the ISMS consists of, and it involves people, process, and technology, which what Veronica shared earlier, which was the brainchild for the CSA trust mark as well. And it's also to be in form of regular information security risk assessment. So an ISMS is actually an efficient, risk-based, and a technology-neutral approach to keeping your information assets secure. So just quickly touching on the controls, I will not go into the details, but basically the new revision of ISO 27002, which is the annex, they just recently got revised, and there are 93 security controls, and they are categorized until 4 teams. So under each team, you can see people, technological, organizational, and physical. And under that, I've put some controls into place. So if you quickly glance through, you can see that some of this what the trust mark is actually talking about. So when CSA said that they are launching this trust mark, it is really very true that it is a pathway towards ISO 27001. So if you look at stuff like under physical security parameters, equipment maintenance, security of assets, this is what the trust mark is also talking about. And under people, if you look at education, awareness, training, this is also what the trust mark is talking about. So I will not deep dive into the controls. If you guys are interested, you can always reach out to us and we can discuss more. So the road to this certification, I've just quickly put it into 10 steps. So step 1 to step 9 is basically what you guys need to do to get ready. So the Cyber Trust mark will form a guide for you to actually go towards this level. And the last part will be the certification audit by GICG. And stage 1, this is also similar to the trust mark. There's a 2-stage approach. Stage 1, we'll be checking your documentation, making sure your management system is in place, your acts of controls have been answered to. We got the assurance, we will move on to stage 2. So stage 2 is where we will check the implementation, we'll check your processes, whether do they meet the objectives, your controls are in place, and the overall compliance to ISO 27001. And at the end, you'll receive a certification. This is a Fictation company. You can take a look how the certification looks like. And of course, GIC is an accredited body under Singapore Accreditation Council. So you will be receiving an accredited certification and a certification mark, which you can use for your marketing purposes. And also quickly wanted to add this slide in, based on what we have reviewed of the trust mark and ISO 27000, just wanted to give a quick sharing on where GICG has evaluated the trust mark requirements against 27000. We believe if you're going for the supporter role, you're 20% complying to ISO 27000 security controls, and practitioner 30%, promoter 40%, performer 50%, and advocate close to 60%. Of course, these are based on the similarities that we assess in the Cyber Trust mark and of course the ISO 27002 Annex of Controls, and based on GICG's professional evaluation. They are close indicative guide, just sharing with you all on where the mapping is. And Lastly, why choose GICG as your certification body? We are, of course, an accredited certification body for ISO 27000 under Singapore Accreditation Council. And of course, we are approved by CSA for the delivery of this cybersecurity trust mark. We are internationally recognized certification body. As mentioned, of our long history, we are about 30 years in this risk management experience, and we have experienced auditors and technical experts to serve you. And we have some case studies, won't touch too much on it, on how we have been certifying our clients to ISO 27000. If you're interested, you can read our press release on our website. And this is just to show you some of our key ISO 27001 certification clients. So we have audited companies who are listed in the Singapore Stock Exchange, such as Bosted Projects, and also the US Stock Exchange, TDCX. We have some startups like Didoco, who are into blockchain technology, OneNet Media Corp, which is a data center. So we have a wide range of clients and expertise in this field. I think that is all that I have. I thank you for your attention. Maybe now we can move towards the Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, you guys can type it on the chat. If not, if you would like to speak, I think the function is available for you to unmute and speak as well. You can raise your hand if you guys have any queries, doubts, anything you would like to ask.
I think there's a question on the Q&A. Somebody asked, CyberTrust Essentials, then CyberTrust Mark would be a total of 5 years of certification. So maybe I can clarify. If you want to go for CyberTrust Mark, you don't necessarily have to start off with Cyber Essentials. So we split the two such that depending on your profile and your business interest, you can either go for the Cyber Essentials or the CyberTrust Mark. So you don't have to start with the Cyber Essentials Mark. So that's why it doesn't really add up. Yep, and I think maybe GIC would want to clarify further on this as well.
Yeah, so I think as what Veronica has pointed out, that it really depends on, let's say you guys want to start out with the Essentials Mark as well, you guys can start that off first. And within the second year, if you guys want to upgrade to the Trust Mark, we can definitely do that as well. So it doesn't mean that you have to complete the 2 years and then scale up for another 3 years. You guys can switch up and we will audit you guys accordingly towards those requirements.
Okay, there's another question on a secure development, software development lifecycle. So it is one of the domains, cyber preparedness domains inside, but we also acknowledge the fact that not every single company, or that some of the companies, when you scope your scope of assessment, it may not include software development. So in these cases, then you would be able to indicate this is NA, and the assessors would verify that this is legitimately not applicable. So that's why we have a not applicable category. Yeah. There's also another question about the difference between the products selling at Singtel and would this be similar? So I think this is actually one of the partners that we work with, among the many partners that we work with, that have products and services that complement the certification. So typically when you look at products and services that complement the certification, some of them may complement in a larger way and some may complement in a smaller way. So typically for certification, it is people, process, technology. And if you literally just buy products, you may not have the people part and the process part covered. So I maybe want to just basically set the expectation that when we work with some of these partners, it's really in identification of the products and services that complement the certification, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you buy one product and service, you can be ready for certification, because it really depends on how far or the extent of the product or service basically covers it. And most of the products would not, except for maybe things like Cyber Essentials as a service, where we work with them and they're as a service providers. So when we work with them, they know what the 5 measures are in Cyber Essentials, and they'll walk with you through a consultancy service to basically walk you through the 5 measures and look at both your people, process, and the technology. Yep. So that's why just buying the product is not equivalent to certification. The certification has to be assessed by the CBs and then through the independent assessment process before the cert can be issued.
Yeah, I think thanks for answering that, Veronica. So adding on is, I think the whole cybersecurity essentials and trust mark, the way that they have been developed is that you can't just buy a product off the shelf and after buying the product, you say, hey, I'm compliant, give me the certification. That does not work, as Veronica also talked about the other elements, that cybersecurity is not just buying a product off the shelf, but it is also awareness of the people, its processes, is doing your risk assessment. So there are many elements, I think, that we touched on in our presentations that you guys need to look at before you guys can go for the essentials mark.
There was a Q&A on VAPT. My difficulty is I'm not quite understanding the question, so I don't know whether anyone else in the panel understands the question and can take it better.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe CK, if you can elaborate a bit more on what do you mean by are you trying to say depth or department of pen test for cloud-based application? Maybe you can just elaborate that.
Maybe in the meantime, in the chat, I saw another question by Ram, which talks about the DPTM, the Cyber Trust, and which one to go for first. So I think in Cyber Trust, you see that there's a domain on data. So when we think about data in the context of cybersecurity, we usually take a broader view on data, which would be maybe your business sensitive data that is not personal data, but something quite proprietary or to a business, like certain algorithms in some cases. Of course, it will also include personal data. Whereas DPTM is a certification that looks into the strength of your personal data protection practice. So I think if you're going digital and you want to protect yourself against cybersecurity in general and to demonstrate that you have the measures in place, then you would look at the Cyber Trust mark. But if your business is also one where you handle and process and manage a lot of personal data, then you would also want to think about DPTM. So there's synergies, but there are also some slight differences between the areas of focus.
Yeah, and I think adding on to Veronica, I think, yeah, if let's say you're a SME and this is your first time diving into implementing cybersecurity measures, I think going for the CSA Essentials or Trust Mark, it is a better approach first for you to at least get in a foundation to good cybersecurity and good cyber hygiene measures. And depending on the nature of business, as what Veronica has pointed out, if you're managing a lot of data, then you can possibly go for DPTM as one. But I would say the Cyber Essentials and Trust Mark will be a good starting point if you're a SME with first time dipping your toes into cybersecurity. I think there's another question by Ram, or is it the same one? When to go for product versus Cyber Essentials mark?
Okay, the two is not Okay, so when you do Cyber Essential Smart, it's holistic people process technology, which means that the technology part means that you need to buy probably some products or some solutions or some technology. Whereas when you buy a product, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the people awareness in place and that you have the processes in place, or that in some cases you can buy the product, but the configuration is not very good and therefore doesn't protect you adequately, which is why the certification or the configuration part of the certification is important to make sure that when you buy the product, it is also securely configured. Yeah. So yeah, to really look at it holistically, actually the people process technology has to be there.
Yep, I think I agree with Veronica as well. I think it's to look at the essentials requirement first and maybe do a bit of a gap on what your processes are, and then understand your critical business data and what you guys are doing, and then identify that to what product will match and secure your data and what will work for you guys. So we hope we have answered your question, Ram. Think let's just wait a couple of seconds if there's any more questions popping in.
Okay, so I think CK added on with a question to ask whether we'll be coming out with the guidelines for the cybersecurity trust mark, because DPTM IMDA has clear guidelines. So actually for DPTM, the requirements, the full requirements are not published. In order to help you to prepare for it, what they have published is a checklist that will help you to basically prepare for it before the full requirements is available to you. For the cybersecurity Cyber Trust Mark or for Cyber Essentials, the full documents are all published online. So including the self-assessment template, which is in the form of a spreadsheet. So it's actually all published on the website.
Yep, CK, I hope Veronica has answered your question. Actually, in our presentation, I think we shared where all the information is available. CSA has all the toolkits, has all the guidance documents. So do refer to that. If you would like to find out more information and like to navigate your way around, can always reach out to us, and we'll be happy to take this offline as well.
Okay, so I think CK has another comment that ISO 27001 has ISO 27002. I'm presuming that what you're trying to say is that there's a list of controls provided that you can refer to. So for the cyber trust, basically, if you look at the cybersecurity preparedness domains, there are 22 domains, and the next level of details as to what goes into each domain and the level of involvement for the different tiers is actually also inside the document that we have published. It's just that it's in the same document, not two separate documents.
Okay, is there any more last questions? I think we'll just give it a couple more seconds before we close this off and announce the special promotions. Okay, maybe I'll just do a quick countdown from 10, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Yep, I think we are good. So thank you everyone for attending this webinar, and especially for you guys, only for you guys, that you have taken your precious time to attend this webinar. We'll be extending a 10% discount off all initial certification fees for the Cyber Trust Mark, and also eventually if you want to go to ISO 27000, we will give you a 10% off as well for the first 50 applicants only. So we are extending this to all webinar attendees. So if you are interested, the email is right there. Apply now, shoot us an email. If today's webinar, you still have some lingering doubts and questions that are not answered, or you're shy to speak up, please drop us an email, chat with us. We'll be happy to have a one-on-one consultation with you guys. And if there's nothing further, I think we thank you so much for taking your precious time to attend this. And I think GIC would also like to thank Veronica and the CSA team for organizing, or I would say for launching such a incredible certification program that is assisting SMEs to just get awareness on what cybersecurity is all about, how to implement measures. So thank you, Veronica, for also being here for this webinar. And if there's nothing else, then we wish you a good afternoon, a good evening, and we hope that you will go for these certifications. Thank you.